Welcome to this International Congress of Culture in Climate Action. We thank you all the speakers and the participants who are going to participate in this first session of the third day of the Congress. My name is Mauro Garcia Santa Cruz. I'm the Vice Chair for Climate Heritage Network, Latin America and the Caribbean region. During this first session, we are having the participation of Jenny Hai, Salma Sabour, and Repaul Kanji. Thank you, all of you, for joining us in this Congress. We are going to present each of the speakers and read a short biography, and then you are going to be able to share your screen with the presentations. Our first speaker is Jenny Hai. She's doctor on philosophy, geography, and anthropology from the Louisiana State University. Also, she is the coordinator for North America for Climate Heritage Network and the director of operations and development at Power of Preservation Foundation. Welcome, Jenny.
Well, good morning from Texas, where it is just after 7 a.m. I know people are joining us from all over, so good afternoon and good evening to those of you around the world. I think my screen has been shared. Is that working for everybody? Yes, great.
Perfect.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, I'm so pleased to speak to you today. I am sure that many of you are familiar with Andrew Potts, who for many years was the coordinator for the Climate Heritage Network and truly is responsible for much of what I am going to share with you today. So I just want to acknowledge that I am standing on the shoulders of giants. You've heard from several Climate Heritage Network members over the course of this amazing event. And I'm, again, just so pleased to be able to share the good news about the project that we have just embarked on called Imagining Futures. So the Climate Heritage Network, as we all sort of know, just in general, is a network of organizations bringing together arts, culture, and heritage in order to organize around climate action, both in protecting those places, traditions, heritage arts that are important to us, and then also leveraging the power of culture from arts to heritage to advocate for and participate in effective climate action. This work is funded by the 1772 Foundation and the Mellon Foundation, and I'll talk a little bit more specifically about what the funding is going to go towards in just a minute, but I wanted to begin by giving us a little bit of context about the Climate Heritage Network in general, and reflect a little bit upon the journey that we've all been on together here over the last 6 years. So in 2018 in San Francisco, we organized a mobilization of arts, culture, and heritage organizations at the Global Climate Action Summit. And this really was the first moment where we all came together in one space and spoke about the amazing work that was already being done, but more importantly, the work ahead of us that we recognized culture was going to play a crucial role in the fight against climate change. After this mobilization, we were fortunate to build momentum towards a global launch, which took place in 2019 with much fanfare. This led to the production of our first action plan from 2020 to 2022, really focusing on the COP process to better participate and start to build some capacity in those spaces at the UNFCCC and the COP conferences. So we again focused there on bringing together our organizations in a way that could demonstrate really clearly what the commitment was from these cultural organizations to climate action. And then most recently, we've had a very effective, I would say, action plan titled Empowering People to Imagine and Realize Climate Resilient Futures Through Culture from Arts to Heritage. And that's going to sound really familiar when I start to talk about the Mellon Foundation activities. So let me introduce that. So through the hard work of the steering committee, the co-chairs, again, Andrew and the many advocates that we have around the world, we were able to pull together a really incredible ask for the Mellon Foundation earlier this year, and we're fortunate enough to be granted a Humanities in Place award between the Mellon Foundation and the 1772 Foundation. That funding comes just to $1.5 million. So we're talking about a really transformative infusion of financial support for the Climate Heritage Network. But this is not a single party sort of activity. So I just want to recognize that there are a number of entities that are leading the 5 separate activities that are going to be funded through this grant. We have from here in Texas, we have the Power of Preservation Foundation and San Antonio, City of San Antonio's Historic Preservation Office, the Cross-Cultural Foundation of Uganda, Preserving Legacies, which I know Salma is going to talk to you about in a minute, so I won't steal her thunder. ICLE, Architecture 2030, the Architecture and Urbanism Research Hub, which is a division of the University of Lagos, and the Built Buildings Lab. So not to delay any further, so there are 5 activities that are funded through the Imagining Futures program. I've divided them into sort of categories here. So there are 2 regional activities, and then there are 3 thematic activities, broadly sort of grouped under mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. And I think that will become clear as we talk a little bit about what those are. For the Mellon Foundation, it was really critical that anything that was funded in North America would have a counterpart in Africa. And so you're going to see that both in the regional activities. So my position has a counterpart in Africa. And then also in the thematic activities. So each of the organizations that are leading these mitigation, adaptation, and resilience efforts also have some sort of a component that is taking place in Africa. And I think this is, at least to me, one of the most exciting aspects of the funding opportunity that we've been generously given here, because it means that we can really start to spread and grow our impact across the globe. And then also we can model how we begin to pick up and grow the other regional coordinators and co-chairs and support the work that they're doing. So I've already spoken a little bit about the North American region. I'll just add that there are a couple of really interesting components to this activity. One of them is all about funding. So creating a funding structure and development plan that will carry the organization forward into the future in a very sustainable way. And then also about the organization, focusing on an organizational structure that makes sense for us. We are not yet registered in any country as a nonprofit or a non-governmental organization. And so we'll be pursuing that as it makes sense in the next year coming forward, which also may give us the advantage of being recognized in these more formal conversations of being able to contribute in ways that we have not necessarily been able to before, or have been relying on our member organizations to really provide us that access. I mentioned the Africa region, so there's a little bit of funding available now for the co-chair of the African region. There's also a coordinator being hired and a Francophone working group that has been set up. So all of those are new positions and a really critical. It was half the continent speaks French, and so we're thrilled to be able to provide that as a value for our membership, and also obviously to be able to communicate. And again, I would reiterate that this is intended to be a model for the other regions, that we obviously want to be able to replicate this and just continue to grow the opportunities to communicate. So the thematic activities that we have, Heritage Adapts to Climate Alliance, HACA. Again, I'm not going to impede on Salma's wonderful presentation I'm sure she's going to speak about, but that largely is an adaptation project, decarbonizing the built environment through heritage. So this is all about mitigation. This is led by the Buildings Lab and the University of Lagos, the architecture hub that I mentioned earlier. This activity is going to focus on finding best practices across the world, both at a practical level and at a policy level, to provide basically a toolkit for people who are interested in some sort of decarbonization work with the built environment, the existing built environment in mind, with obviously the knowledge that most of the existing buildings that we have today will be here in 40 years. And so we need to be thinking critically about how we are adapting those and mitigating the impact of their carbon footprint and emissions. And then finally, we have the Race to Resilience culture, which is all about resilience, led by ICLE, both the USA and Africa. ICLE organization. So we will be working with them to identify local governments on both continents to pair together in a peer learning sort of a situation. So I will provide a link in just a minute to our social media, but we have been sharing information about how to get involved in these activities pretty heavily. So if any of this sort of strikes a fancy with you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So just briefly, the outcomes that we're anticipating for the Imagining Futures project. So we obviously want to increase culture-based climate action. I think this is consistent with the working plans that we have had since the beginning, since 2018, truly. Our commitment is to show the work that's already been done and then also grow build capacity for our organizations, our member organizations, to grow their climate action into a meaningful and a meaningful contribution. We want to transform climate policy through cultural heritage. I think you'll see through the activities that I just described that this goes from the international level all the way down to the local level. And I think that's one of the most important parts of this project, is that we are empowering not only the Climate Heritage Network to participate at this really high level, high stakes sort of conversation, but also individual communities will be benefiting from the work that we are doing and understanding how policy at the local level can really impact us on the day-to-day. And then finally, we want to support our partner communities. So I think one of the things that we've heard throughout the sort of growth of the organization is that we have these incredible communities that have so much potential to do so much good. And truly, this is about empowering them to make those changes to fight climate change in their own place-based and culture-based ways. Okay, so I mentioned that I would encourage you to get involved. Obviously, if you're in North America or Africa, I would love to hear from you. And I know Mauro would also love to hear from you should you be in the Latin American region. I will say that the most effective way that we are communicating currently is via social media or our website. If you scan this QR code here, we do have a pretty simple membership application. If your organization has not joined, I encourage you to take a look, consider signing on and approving the MOU, and then letting us know that you're interested. We also have a very active Climate Heritage Youth Network. I'm actually meeting with them in a couple of hours. So if you are a young person and motivated to be a leader, we are going to be convening several times in 2025 to activate the power of youth across the globe. So please don't hesitate. And then finally, I want to encourage, I know that I'm again not the only one to speak about the global call to action, but I want to encourage all of you to consider signing on, adding your voice to this global campaign. We really have had an incredible showing. We have something like 2,000 signatories at this point from truly all across the world, over 90 countries. And I would absolutely love if you would add your voice to call for both, or rather all cultural heritage, art, and creative industries to be represented within climate policy and recognized as this crucial piece of solving the climate crisis. And with that, I will conclude. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny, for your presentation. At the end of this session, we will have a question and answer moment. So we invite all the participants to write their questions in the Zoom chat. Thank you. We are going to present now our next speaker. Salma Sabour is a physical and environmental engineer from the University of Liège and the École Centrale de Paris. She has a doctorate and postdoctoral research at the University of Southampton, and she is actually the Director of Science for the Preservation Legacies Project. Welcome, Salma. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Mauro, and thanks, Jenny, for this incredible presentation. It's always so inspiring to listen to what you guys are doing in this space. And despite the fact that I would love to be doing more, but we can't do everything. We can need so many lifetimes to do all the objectives. In this presentation, I don't want to just concentrate on the Preserving Legacies project, but share with you a little bit more about the importance of plural knowledge systems and what it means to have a locally led plural knowledge system integration and decolonizing science and research in ways that maybe you don't expect. Actually, this is how we decolonize. And so like practicalities of supporting filter-based climate action through a plural knowledge system that brings science and research to the local level. And I'm sure Repaul will jump on some elements as well in this aspect. Just quickly, some concepts I will be talking about: risk, which we consider as the potential for adverse consequences for human ecological system or heritage system, and adaptation, which the one I'll be talking about is mostly processes of adjustment of the human system. And in terms of locally led, because I'll be speaking a lot about locally led adaptation, and we'll be exploring the three aspects of locally led: evolving decision making to the lowest appropriate level, ensuring transparency and accountability, and collaborative action and investment. So one last aspect is the fact that we acknowledge the importance of interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity. And these are the spaces where we can actually really think about truly integration of local knowledge systems. The first example I want to share with you is in Mauritania, in the Parc National du Bandarien, which is a natural World Heritage Site. It's a wetland, it's a desert environment where you have communities live in. So it's a natural World Heritage Site. UNESCO is not designating the cultural values of the sites, but they are local and they are important. More than 1,500 people live there. They are faced by climate change issues through erosion, flooding, inundations, and changes in the landscape they live in and the seascape they live in. And what's happened in this process, it was during my PhD and during COVID, and all data collection processes were stopped. So one of the responses we had is training heritage managers in conducting qualitative data assessments and in supporting the discussion about climate change with communities. And actually, it was such an incredible experience because the manager took ownership of this process and of having this space of discussing with the communities that they were not used to, because there were a lot of conflicts. There's a lot of agreements between them, but there are a lot of conflicts. And climate change created actually a space of compassion and empathy. And they even worked with communities into drawing, non-verbal communication of how future climate change could be and explore future visioning. So this is heritage managers that are doing future visioning with communities living in heritage places about how they imagine future climate change. And this was all based on local knowledge and indigenous knowledge, because these are indigenous communities. And these were drawings of one of the villages and how it will shrink and flooded. So the blue is like the flooded area and the red is the erosion, without any provision of future climatic data. So they didn't, no scientific data was included in this process of future visioning, showing that we can also explore futures scenarios without having 100% sure about whether they will happen or not, and exploring actually how we can prepare to different scenarios and how we can prepare to what we imagine potential scenarios. And with scientific data, we can then explore more the feasibility and whether actually these scenarios that have been imagined are real or not. We can also use other perspectives, which I will be sharing with you. But this is just to show you that climate action can really start from a conversation with stakeholders and right holders locally that are leading the discussion and that are leading the future visioning of climate change impacts and risk. This process needed steps that were really important, because it was like research practice processes that needed validation, long-term relationships, skill sharing between researchers and practitioners, but also means and enablers of this communication and of this knowledge exchange. And here I'm sharing lots of examples, but I would like just to share with you a little bit more about cultural resonance. For me, it's one of the key elements that drive me to work in places that are not maybe my culture, but for example, for me, any desert environment is something that I can relate to, because I'm coming from a desert community. So I think it's really finding ways to create collaboration between research and management that is long-term, and that is not just like a one project and that's it, and continuing this conversation, because adaptation process, risk assessment process, it's a long-term process and needs building trust on a long-term scale. All this needs to happen with a decolonizing lens, so questioning our own understanding of concepts and understanding of what is right and wrong in the space of adaptation. And in this process, with the Preserving Legacies project, which I welcome you, Will McGarry will be presenting later on, and he will talk a little bit more about the project. But we developed a kind of, based on the IPCC risk assessment, a flower of risk that acknowledge the integration of plural knowledge systems. And I will share with you some examples of how we used this process of locally led plural knowledge integration. So this is in Kutamaku. It's a cultural landscape between Benin and Togo. And communities actually don't live in these houses. Those are called takienta, but they are very important for spirituality, for identity. For example, in the takientas, we will find like drawings that will reflect in scarification in the communities. And to discuss climate risk in this cultural landscape, heritage managers and professionals use an unconventional way of, for example, mapping values and attributes of heritage through drawing, knowing that these communities are mostly analphabet, so they don't write. And this was an exploration of like, how can we talk about risk? How can we explore adaptation? How can we explore potential future climate change through a way that is not that is actually culturally appropriate for the communities? And this comes very organically. Nothing was prepared to do that. It was really organic. When they sat with the communities, they started like reflecting on that. In Colombia as well, in Cartagena de India, in Colombia, our custodians, while engaging with the communities, found out that communities needed something very culturally meaningful to spend 3 hours talking about climate change and risk assessments, especially when you're talking about very vulnerable communities that are suffering from racism and colonial legacies. One aspect of all that as well is democratizing climate data. And this is one of the work we're doing, is trying to make climate data as accessible at the lower level. So it's not having an expert who is doing the integration of knowledge system and being like, I am taking the science, taking the local knowledge and integrating it, is allowing the science to be accessible to the communities, to the heritage managers, especially climate science, which is at this stage of our time very exclusive and used by exclusive groups in the research sector, but also in the practice sector. And this is Cartagena de India, where actually custodians we worked with in preserving legacies were able to downscale climate data for different climate scenarios in 2060 for Cartagena and reflect and take ownership of this data and its interpretation and communication. So 3 elements that are really important for me at a local level, including heritage manager and communities at a local level of heritage places, is accessing the data, having freedom to interpret it in different ways, using different knowledge systems, and also being able to communicate it. And in the communication aspects, I want to share with you this game that the custodians from the Cartagena, Colombia, Cartagena de India in Colombia did. It's a loteria. Now that you know what the loteria is, it's a kind of a bingo game that is very played in Colombia. And actually you can find like a mixture of people, elderly, young people, sitting together for hours and hours and hours and having fun playing this game. And they developed one that is based on the values, attributes of the local communities, exploring different climate hazards, different human responses to this hazard adaptation perspectives. And this was a true success. And I think this is really reflecting how can you bring the science to in a way that is very different from what we are used to. But to start conversations, but actually to change mindset and to really plant the seed of future reflection. Lots of communities that are struggling with climate change and that are like at the front of climate change. It's very difficult for them to do future vision and to think about 100 years in. So this was a way to kind of like start this reflection and allow communities that are the most impacted to also have a say in how they imagine futures and different scenarios. The same with in Benin and Togo, they've shared different climate scenarios and discussed them with the communities, and they were very impressed because communities were really, sorry about that, were really engaging with this process, and even they really reflected on what would be the impacts, you know, if nothing has been done, and then how can we reduce risk and potential impact through what actions, and you know, even thinking about changes of values and attributes and transformation and transition. So it was very, very, I think it was very humbling for us to see that actually that it can happen, and it is something that is definitely possible for communities to really be part and have agency in making decisions about their future. And in this space, I think one key element is having knowledge brokers in all parts of when we're talking about heritage adaptation and climate change, is having knowledge brokers in the heritage sector, in the climate sector, and in the adaptation sector that are facilitating conversation and facilitating communication between these different sectors that are now so interlinked. But we know that in the heritage sector globally, we are facing a challenge when we're talking about adaptation. We're facing a wall. There's little research globally in adaptation to climate change for heritage sector and in other sectors, but I can say that for the heritage sector. And finally, final points to bring is all this can happen only through leadership and trust. Not every heritage manager will be, engaged with climate change and climate data and exploring this kind of like tools and ways of engagement. And we acknowledge that it's not a problem. We don't need like everyone to be like this, but we need to see and to acknowledge when there are leaders in this space, and when those leaders are building trust with their communities, and trust is the key element for successful adaptation between all actors of this adaptation process and risk assessment process. So yeah, this is a little bit everything I wanted to share. And just coming back on the Preserving Legacies project, I didn't share much about it, but we are a 3-year program that's engaged with heritage places to support them through climate literacy, risk literacy, and seed funding for adaptation in a 3-year process. And we are our application are open for the next cohort of 2025. So please, if you know heritage places that would be interested and that are facing climate challenges and don't have maybe enough support in relation to better understanding their climate risk and building capacity, in enhancing, strengthening their capacity to respond to those challenges, then please share this QR code with them, and I'll post a couple of links in the chat as well. Thank you so much for listening, and thanks again, Mauro, for inviting me to be part of this conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Salma, for your presentation. We are going to move for our next speaker, Repaul Kanji. He studied computer science at the National Institute of Technology, Calicut. He has also a master's and PhD in risk-informed sustainable development at the Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee. He is the co-founder of the Confederation of Risk Reduction Professionals. Welcome, Repaul.
Thank you, Mauro. Thank you for inviting me and giving this opportunity to share with everyone here about a particular work that we had done. And I guess Salma and set the context very clearly about how we should be more involved and engaged at hyperlocal climate adaptations, and more so if it is through the cultural heritage, through the traditional knowledge, indigenous practices, and the place-based wisdom of that particular place that we are talking about. So I would quickly run all of you through a small presentation, and I think it would give a very clear idea of what possibly could be done, because we literally did this. So jumping on to it. Before I start the main context of the presentation, I would briefly like to point out certain impediments that still exist in our daily ways of intervening in terms of adaptation, in terms of disaster risk reduction also. The first one is that we have this habit of imposing solutions. It is actually incredible to see how the cultural heritage network, the climate heritage network, sorry, my bad, and the preserving legacies are actually going down onto the real ground and working with communities and not imposing solutions. This is actually a good way of doing it. But otherwise, what has always happened is that we have this habit of imposing solutions. So that's not really what works actually. The second problem that we need to actually think of is about systemic issues. When we are trying to address a problem, what usually happens is that we see the surface of it, but the problems, the vulnerabilities are rather historical, they are chronic, and requires a very deep diving in to kind of understand what really caused the problem, what actually created the risk, so as to speak. So that we do not understand sometimes, and sometimes we just fail to address. The third problem is that given the interconnectedness of the world that we are living in now, the problems that we face are very, very modern. But to a certain extent, the solutions that we think of or we provide are not so modern. So there has to be a step up in the way we approach solving those problems. And it's not about doing something which is multidisciplinary or multi-sectoral. We will have to cross those boundaries of disciplines and think of transdisciplinary approaches. And the fourth is what we actually see, that there's something that has happened, a very huge disaster, and then we try to put a band-aid on it. So we are managing the consequences, which is also not the right way to do things, of course. So looking at these four very pertinent problems, we thought of intervening in this particular community in a city in India, where we thought of not going or not, building up on these existing issues. So just before I go into the main context of the presentation, this is the community that I'm talking about. This is Jodhpur, a city in a state called Rajasthan in India, and it's just located off the Thar Desert in India. So you would imagine the temperatures going impressively high during the summers, and that has given rise to the problem of heat waves in summers. Of course, rising temperature was a problem, of course, for a very long time, but then due to climate change, and we have proved it that this is because of climate change, the temperatures have risen to such an extent that now it is not so much bearable by the communities. So that's one part of the story. The second part of the story is because of the other changes that are happening, the precipitation, that's the rainfall, has also become a problem. How? We will come to that later, but this is the overall context of the city. And another important thing is that this particular city is famous for two things. One, the blue houses, which you can, of course, see on your screen. And the story is that because of the blue houses, the color of the houses, the indoor temperatures of the houses are quite ambient, which is, of course, true. Again, I will go into the details of it later. And the second thing is that apart from these blue houses that you see, the city has a huge and intricate network of water bodies of different types. So you would see that this city, when it was established in 1456, the kings actually understood the geoclimatic condition of the city, and they imagined that this could actually be a problem: water stress, water scarcity, eventually leading to droughts. So they built the city around hundreds of water bodies which actually supported the lifestyle of the people. So these are the two things that you will have to keep in mind while I speak about Jodhpur and the interventions. So the overall objective of this entire intervention, spanning over a year or more, was to blend the use of knowledge which is found in the natural realm of habitation. Some would call it culture, some would call it traditional knowledge, some indigenous practices, place-based wisdom. But the way we see it is that the knowledge which is within the communities, right? And then merge it with scientific advancements and then mainstream it for climate action. So what we are actually speaking of is bringing these two not so well speaking sectors together, science and cultural heritage or traditions, so as to speak, and then see if they can be mainstreamed in the policy. So you have a way of top-down approach, and then also making it a part of the daily lives of the people. So you also have a bottom-up approach as well. So how did we do it? The first things first, as I mentioned, rising temperature has always been a problem, so not a big deal. But eventually what has happened over the past 3-4 years is that the India Meteorological Department has started declaring heat waves very frequently for this place. Now, as a mandate of what we do in India is that we need to have a heat action plan for these kind of cities. Now, what we wanted to do is that we wanted to have a heat action plan for this city, which literally speaks that, yes, this is the heat action plan of the city, and this is of Jodhpur. So there is no copy pasting of documents here. So what we did is that we analyzed, first of all, 100 years of climate data to understand whether it's actually climate change or it's just natural variability and we are just blaming everything on climate change. The second is that we did a little bit of survey, we did a little bit of desk-based review of things to understand that our proposition of using traditional knowledge, is it feasible? Do we actually have those kind of knowledge that can be used to beat the heat? And third, when we were convinced enough that yes, this can be done, we assisted NRDC India and Mahila Housing Trust. These are the organizations who generally do a heat action plan in India. We assisted them in developing a heat action plan for the city, which leverages culture as a tool. So this is the first of its kind that has ever been done in India. Now, you see the policy level ecosystem is set. So now the government, the bureaucrats know that they have to do this. But we now also need to collect enough evidences so as to say that, see, you have the policy in place, but you also have these things, these knowledges, this huge collection of wisdom that you can actually put into practice. So what did we do? We went around speaking to different people of coming from different strata of the society. So you would, of course, everyone would understand that the impact of climate change, be it in terms of heat, be in terms of extreme rainfall, everyone from different strata of the society will perceive those impacts in different ways. So they would have different notion about climate change. They would have different notion of how they would manage it. So we spoke to local political leaders. We spoke to grandmothers. We spoke to public drivers. We spoke to traditional sweetmeat shop owners. So everyone who is like a part of the city. And they depicted the change in climate, but in their ways, it's the weather that's changing. Nevertheless, they depicted how it's changing, how they have been affected, how their economies are being affected, how they're actually using their old ways to beat those kind of problems. And it was during these kind of discussions that it came up that, as I said, the rising temperature is not the problem, but due to the frequent rains or rather erratic rainfall, the humidity has also risen, and that is causing prevalent health issues amongst women and also children. So this was something that eventually came up when we started communicating with the communities. So this is a documentary. There are no experts talking. There are just people of this entire city. They are illustrating the riskscape of the entire city in their own words, in their own opinion. And once you watch it, which is available freely, you would understand how the trajectory of the entire city has shifted from being resilient, actually being resilient when it was founded in 1400, but now it has actually become fragile. So you would know this. So the illustration of the riskscape of the city becomes very, very clear. And it also, of course, has this documentation of the kind of knowledge, the wisdom the people already have, and they're using it to beat the heat, of course, and then other things also. Now, when we're doing these kind of discussions, we understood two very clear things. The first one is that we usually visualize or label or tag women as the vulnerable part of the society. So they are being affected, impacted, which is true, of course, but they also need to be seen as the bearers of knowledge, right? So we will have to kind of empower them to make them confident to take part in hyperlocal climate actions because they have the knowledge, but they are not confident that would they be able to contribute. So that part of confidence boosting is something that we have to do. And the second is that what about the transference of this knowledge? So intergenerational dialogue is something also important. So we built this co-learning and mutual sharing space where we learn from the women of the community. We taught them a little about climate science, a little bit that we know. We showed them different aspects of it. And technically speaking, we did a lot of climate science studies together, but it was all done in a very, a lucid fashion so that they understand it. And it was done in a vernacular language, no English, no terminologies, nothing. So it was just Hindi or the local language that they speak. And for the kids, what we did is that we started playing a game with them, asking them to imagine what has changed during their course of life. And you would not you would actually not appreciate it until and unless you hear it from them, that they do not have the scientific analysis of what is going on, but they can very clearly understand that things are changing and they need to grasp a little bit of it to kind of, build a resilient life for themselves. So that's the second part of it. Now, with the rising temperatures, of course, this aspect of blue houses in ambient indoor temperature was a little dicey for us. I mean, this is a good thing. If this is a good thing, then this must be adapted in other areas also. If actually the blue color is contributing to ambient indoor temperatures. We did an architectural study. And while doing the architectural study, we designed a prototype which measures temperature and humidity at a very hyperlocal scale at every second. So you take this device and you walk across the house and you see the temperature and the humidity falling. So when we did that, we found that when you go into a so-called blue house, the temperature and the humidity actually goes down. And this does not happen when you go into a contemporary house. But the color blue is, of course, not the reason. So we did an architectural study and we understood that there are different architectural elements which is contributing to this. So we knew that if these elements can be integrated into the contemporary way of building homes, we probably would land up building houses which are climate smart, which are climate intelligent. So we designed a report, we did some audio visuals, and we communicated it to the corporation, who are the ones responsible for bringing up development plans for the city. So now they're using it to kind of integrate those things that there is already in their knowledge. That's the first thing. The second thing is that this device that we designed, it actually started giving rise to another idea, that can this be used as a heat health warning system? So if you have enough number of these devices, you would have enough number of data, enough amount of data to build a local threshold for that particular region, which will give you an indication of this temperature, this humidity is not good for you to go out. So this can actually work as a hyperlocal heat health warning systems for designing heat indices, hyper-localized heat indices, and we are trying this in some other area in India as well. Now, picking up on the intergenerational dialogue, we realize that there are some children who have this idea, but there are larger number of students, larger number of children who actually are moving far away from this kind of knowledge that they hold, the community holds. So what we did is that we did a very immersive but lucid and very open kind of a workshop, where we did not burden them with any kind of knowledge. So this is another trend that we must actually steer away from. Whatever happens, we try to build the capacity of the young children and give them the responsibility to see, you have to do this. So we felt that it's kind of wrong. So what we did is that we showed them the science. We showed them what kind of knowledge their communities already have and how they're interconnected and how they're actually helping each other, how their traditional architecture is helping them, how the water bodies that the entire city used to survive on is now not being maintained, and hence a problem for urban floods and waterlogging. So we explained all of this, and we said that now you have all the tools, you have all the hobbies that you are interested in. Some of you are interested in music, drama, whatever you want to do, you do, and you present a narrative to everyone in the city. We will do the job of bringing everyone important in the city. So on the fourth day, it was a 4-day long workshop. On the fourth day, we had the mayor, we had the king of this particular place, and many media houses, of course, and they presented a play which literally very clearly and loudly said that the trajectory of development that the city is now taking is not something that they appreciate, and they would have it differently, and what they would do. So now, inspired by what the children have done, the custodians of cultural heritage in this place, they have taken it upon themselves to make all of this a part of the curriculum, and many things are actually happening even when the intervention has actually ended almost 5 months back. So they are continuing this, and we are glad that this has happened. In terms of impact, you see mainstreaming of cultural heritage or traditional knowledge into policy making, that has happened. Voices of youth making an attempt to kind of bringing their voices out to show that this is not what we want for our future, we want something different. That has also happened. As I said, custodians of culture, they're accepting what we have done and they're taking it forward. One important thing that has come up is that in all of this, somewhere the livelihood has also been improved. Initially, it was a blue house that attracted visitors and tourists. So the locals used to say, come and see my house, and it's blue in color. This is how the temperature is being controlled inside. Now they have actually scientific evidence. So they are inviting tourists to come and see, this is the architecture that our forefathers had. And we have ambient indoor temperatures, whatever the temperature is outside, we are not bothered, and it's just a fan which is good enough for us. We do not need ACs, we do not need coolers. That has also become an alternative way of very localized livelihood. And of course, as I said, water bodies, they are not being maintained, and that actually gave rise to a lot of problems. Now they're being sorted out because people have started taking responsibilities, and they're cleaning it, and they're doing a lot of things around it. So that was the social impact part of the entire thing. And in terms of other kind of impacts, this particular case study has been adopted in ARC 3.3. You can also find it in the World Cities report. We have an academic article on this also, so the entire rigor that we have went through is peer reviewed, and it's available to everyone if anyone wants to replicate, of course, contextualize and replicate it. We also have a practitioner's blog, because oftentimes what happens that when you go through this process of interventions, you have different things coming onto your mind, and these are not really coming out in terms which could actually help someone else. So we have a practitioner's blog also on that. We have received quite a lot of awards for this, and yeah, that's just about it. So I would be happy to talk more about this and some other interventions as well. But the whole idea of making this presentation was to give everyone an idea that at a hyper local level, it is actually possible to use culture, the place-based wisdom for climate action, for disaster risk reduction. And as Salma pointed out, that we need good leaders. We need people who are interested in doing this. So if we have that particular ecosystem in place, we are good to go. Thank you everyone for your patience, and happy to answer any questions if you have one.
Thank you, Repaul, Jenny, and Salma for your presentations. We are moving to the moment of question and answers. We have a question from Giovanna to Jenny. She would love to learn more about the youth program from CHN regarding the age. What is required if there is a process selection? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. We're so impressed with the work that the Youth Forum has been doing. So they are led by sort of a mirror of the co-chairs. So they're represented by conveners from across the globe, and they've actually just brought together a new leadership cohort. So I mentioned I'm meeting with them later today. Their social media, I think, is the best way to contact them right now. And you can find that on our website. It's actually climateheritage.org/youth. And regarding age, I don't think that they're particularly strict about what the cutoff is. I will say the group thus far has largely been, I would say, between the sort of 20 and 25 range. But that's not to say that anyone outside of that range would not be welcomed. I think they are wildly, radically inclusive. So yes, I would encourage you to contact them via social media.
Thank you, Jenny. We have another question to Salma. What do you consider to be the main learning from working with communities from several countries in different continents?
This is a very difficult question.
Sorry.
I think the main learning is that we don't know much, especially when talking about climate change adaptation, where there's so little that is really done in a way that is meaningful. And a lot of adaptation to climate change is happening in spaces that are very hierarchical and not mindful, not engaging equitably communities. So I think I'm learning that issues that people face are very similar in different contexts, but it comes to complex issues and vulnerabilities, as Repaul was saying, underlying vulnerabilities that have existed for a long time. And finally, one other thing that I've learned a lot is that like adaptation is really just work, like doing efforts to repair the symptoms, and it's like great for the short midterm, but in a long term, it's really thinking about how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Like adaptation alone will not bring us that far away. So I think it's really thinking about adaptation with the mitigation lens, always keeping that like, is this adaptation can decrease greenhouse gas emission, and can I, along my adaptation practice, think about mitigation, which I found amazing in what Repaul was sharing. So yeah, I think this was my main learning. But it's mostly that we don't know much and that the future is very unknown despite everything. We're trying to kind of like look into, there's so many different possible futures. And it's interesting to explore them all and to prepare for them all, as we have the capacity right now to do that.
Thank you, Salma. We have another question for Repaul. Considering your experiences, how would you recommend that intergenerational activities on culture and climate action to be planned?
Wow, this is another tough question.
We are so sorry.
No, as I mentioned, this whole idea of imposing or trying to empower the next generation, thinking that we have everything sorted out and all our ideas, knowledge can be just transferred, is not going to work in the long run. So actually, the next generation, they are more equipped in a way that they are very tech savvy, they understand things. So what could be a good way of planning everything is that just handing them the evidences that are required. So what usually happens is that the next generation would feel that no, these are practices, these are things that we used to do and might not be relevant today. But once you show them the evidences behind it, the science behind it, and how it is actually helping them, that they would not reject it. And we have, I personally have seen it over multiple scenarios across India as well as in South Asia too. So it's just a logical way of approaching. So you give them the evidences and they would figure out a way of doing things. For example, just a very quick example would be, once the Egyptian youth were told how the Coptic calendar actually is still relevant today and can help in planning the outings into the sea, they took up that knowledge, they understood that it's still relevant, and they used the knowledge of tech. And they we might be familiar with this software, with this application called Windy. So they customized Windy with the Coptic calendar, and they are now using it as a warning system or using it as a system just, for the fishermen. So it's just about handing them over the evidence and making them believe that they can do it. Otherwise, they actually are fantastic. They can do it. That's my personal experience. Some would differ, some would agree, but yes, that's my way of thinking about it. Thank you. I hope that answers a bit of the question.
Thank you, Repaul. We have a last question for Jenny. What do you consider to be the main strength of the coordinated work between North America and Africa?
Wow, the main strength. I think there's a political side of this that I think is really important to recognize right now, that the political climate has changed in the United States in a way that is even further impeding the effort that is being put in at the local and sometimes state level here. And I think that our colleagues in Africa in many ways can demonstrate for us here how to overcome those political challenges in ways that perhaps we have not been challenged to solve previously. I would also say that I think, Salma, the examples that you provided, the Benin and Togo example, I think is really fascinating to me that there are spaces that cross borders in ways that make those borders in some ways meaningless, and learning how to collaborate and adapt for a future that the folks on either side of this imaginary line that we've created, I think, is something that our colleagues in Africa do extremely well, and we can work together to make that happen. I hope that sort of touches on what we were trying to get at there.
Thank you, Jenny. Well, we are arriving to the end of this roundtable. We want to thank Jenny Hai, Salma Sabour, and Repaul Kanji for participating in this roundtable at the International Congress of Culture in Climate Action. Thank you all. We are moving now to the next session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.